And alright, what are we looking at here? It's Commissar versus Adler. Another faction main, but this time, a dwarf enjoyer. An actual straight up dwarf main has entered the tournament. One of the most awkward factions in Domination, but Commissar's actually figured it out. They go for kind of a crazy man-tied mass capture weight dwarf style. And they're going to be trying to beat Adler's Dark Elves. Now, both of these players are very strong. Dark Elves do counter dwarves to an extent. At least a soft counter. So one must wonder how this is going to play out. We're seeing a Ranger tied over here. Lightly armored crossbow dwarves. Look at those cloaks. No fancy Viking helmets on them. We got a Garagrim Iron Fist with that massive mohawk. Jeez Louise. And what abilities does he have? Garagrim is extremely unorthodox. And he has not much. Yeah, he has a little bit of damage resist here. He's going to be decently fighty. And I guess he probably has a spin to win ability somewhere. I don't even see it. Wait, he just gives extra damage in an AoE. He's like a really garbage buff tool. Compared to a Grail Relique on the Petonian roster, this is a little janky, but I guess we'll see where it goes. Commissar is a dwarf specialist, not I. We're going to see a little bit of a charge on these here Knight assassins. And this is going to be pretty decent for the dwarves. Now, both players submitted this replay, by the way. So I do not know who wins it. Sometimes we have it where only one person submits a replay and you can kind of guess who won. It's usually the green person, but this one I do not know. Could go either way. Loki or Felhard, by the way, for the Dark Elves. We haven't actually gone over their build. He's pretty sick with his little dual swords here, rushing into combat. He regens aggressively with the Helm of Kraken. And that's going to help him quite a bit. In fact, he's here to specifically duel dwarf characters. But again, we're seeing some cool counterplay. Garagrim Iron Fist does have anti-infantry. I don't know if he beats Lokir. Lokir might still be able to win, but with the support of a dwarf lord, he probably loses. 2-on-1s generally favor the 2, even if the 1 is a lot stronger. Dark Elves also have a lot of Witch Elves too. These ladies got anti-infantry up the wazoo. And they're going to be very good at clearing chaff like miners and even dwarf warriors. Shades over here too with dual weapons in case they need to rush into melee is pretty cool. And which kind of seeing like a kite-ish style for the Dark Elves. But what counters that? Rocks from the sky. We got a grudge thrower in the distance. It's hammering into these shades. And it's forcing the Dark Elves to engage more aggressively. Now, many of these shots are going wide and are missing. One very nearly hitting. We're seeing a little bit of maneuvering to just dodge those rocks to buy time. And the Dark Elves, seeing that, yes, indeed, there is artillery, they're going to be deciding to go in for the big fight now. They know there's artillery, and that means that there's going to be less to defend the front line, and this charge is pretty menacing. Witch Elves are rushing on in to catch up these dwarf warriors, drinking the witch brew to increase their stats quite dramatically. For those of you that don't know, the chance to hit is 35% plus your melee attack of 72 minus the melee defense of 40. So this witch brew giving 24 melee attack is going to increase their damage by quite a bit. Going from like, like 25% chance to hit to 50%. That's basically double damage. Very nice, helping them cleave through the dwarves. It's looking a little sketchy for the dwarves, but if they're able to hold their range units, I think they might be able to push back. We'll see. We're seeing another fight here with Garagrim and Lokir. Garagrim forced to disengage because of Lokir's massive damage. This guy has armor piercing, but not as much damage as Lokir, and Garagrim is naked. He has no armor whatsoever, and he's getting very, very low. He doesn't heal like Lokir either. And with this fight finishing, things could change. The tide could go the way of the Dark Elves because Lokir can start uninterruptedly engaging against these range units. Another hit on Garagrim too, 126 life. And he goes down, Garagrim. I'd say a Slayer's death, but he dies running for his life. Very disappointing. And Lokir's now going to be able to secure this position. You can see this position is starting to collapse, and if Garagrim was around, he could start chopping up these heroes and dislodging them from the points. But that play is going to shift the wider battle indeed. One range unit is alive, but Lokir is going to have a field day, maybe. No, he's going to go for the Lord instead. Okay. Going for the long con. Now, the Dark Elves are triple capped. In Domination, you need 1,500 tickets to win. And each of these points is 1 ticket per second. So, there's only about 5 minutes that the Dark Elves can... yeah, they only have about 5 minutes worth of triple cappedness before they lose the game. So, going for the long con is risky. But I would say they generally have just enough time to handle this. Even though they're not taking this point right now, they should be able to secure some points in a bit. I will say they're taking some pretty massive losses. They did have their mid-game passive trigger, by the way, Murderous Prowess. It's basically an insane stat boost that makes Dark Elves much stronger in later stages of the battle, because when you get summoned in, they still have that boost. But, well, yeah, that stat boost is going to help them out. It's going to help them out in the fight here. Because if they go for the Lord kill and they have that buff, they should be able to retake pretty quickly. Executioners have been summoned in, by the way. These guys are elite Dark Elf units. They got anti-infantry like crazy, and they beat more or less all Dwarf infantry in combat. The only counter is shooting. The Lord is dead too. And this is looking like a Dark Elf rebound. I wouldn't say a comeback. I don't know if they were behind with Lokir getting so much damage in. And this is certainly looking a little bit rough. Point number 1 is secured, so they bought themselves a lot more time. They'll still need another point, and they might even need to triple cap soon. But if nothing can kill these executioners, it's basically over. We did see a grudge thrower snipe too from the Harpies. And the dwarves are now desperately trying to pull things back. Dark Riders being summoned too. These are not fighters, but the Dark Elves have figured, you know what? I think I have won the main fight well enough. What I really need to do is to clean up units and capture some points. This is a show of confidence for Mr. Adler over here. Those Dark Riders do get caught by a few Slayers though. But this is a show of confidence. Is it overconfidence? Will they be killed slowly and insidiously? We will see. But right now, if I had to put my money down, I think Dark Elves certainly have a strong lead. Shades blasting away at the Slayers, doing very good damage. And over here on the far side, the Sisters of Singing Doom. They're going to be beating up some Slayer Pirates. Even more Shades arrive too. Their dual weapon variants. Anti-infantry to clear Slayers, very strong. And the Dwarves are left on their final point. They have but a few units, just a Dwarf Warrior and a Miner. Nothing too insane. They do have some units to contest over here though. A little bit of a play being made actually. Axe Throwers. Ranger, great weapons. Extremely good for clearing off elites. But the loss of Garagrim and the Lord showing its ugly head once again. Gonna be showing, gonna be turning the tide of this battle. If Lokir had died early on, these Rangers could have deleted these Executioners, and then the Dark Elves would have a problem. They have basically no infantry on this point. But because Lokir survived, and quite cost efficiently cleared up that hero squad, well, now the Rangers are in trouble. Not only are they frostbitten by the foul magics of the Dark Elves, they're also charged by some Dark Riders. That mobility play, very good for securing late games. Because once the enemy army is smaller, you can just outmaneuver them constantly. And I would say this is almost completely over. Now, technically the Dwarves win on a 1 cap. They have one capture point left, and the race to 1,500 tickets. If nothing happens, the dwarves win. They only need 500 tickets left. The Dark Elves need more than 1,000. But that is a lot of time. A 1 cap, you only get 1 ticket per second. So you're looking at like 8 minutes here. 8 minutes of needing to fight while behind against the Dark Elves. The battle has lasted 10 minutes, and the dwarves basically have no units left. Anyone with any semblance of pattern recognition will know that this is very bad for the dwarves, but you never know. Anything is possible. Comebacks can happen, and misplays can be made. Sorceress gets smacked in the back by the Dwarf Lord. She doesn't like that. She's gonna get routed. And this is a start. She does have enough wherewithal to cast some magic, though. Getting a decent amount of damage, too. Was that overcast? No, I think that was normal cast. And she does manage to escape. Dwarf Lord simply not fast enough to actually catch her. But the Witch Elves are in. Again, Witch Brood, Witch Elves. 82 melee attack. And bonus versus infantry 8. So that's a attack value of 90 down to 40 because of the melee defense, all the way back up to 85% chance to hit. They don't have armor piercing damage, but it doesn't matter. They're basically guaranteed to hit these guys. And that's very brutal. Actually insane how quickly those Dwarf Warriors go down. They rely heavily on their melee defense to stay in the fight. But as soon as you hit a tipping point of melee attack, they don't feel too scary. Capture point is getting secured, and I believe this is the end of the dwarves. Not many units left. We're going to see some Slayer Pirates come in, but units have capture weight. These guys have 5. The Dark Elves here have about 20. I don't think they're getting dislodged anytime soon, and the dwarves tap out. That'll be GG. And that means our dwarf main here has to win the next 2 games if they want to not drop into the losers bracket. Let's take a look. Shades, lots of value. Witch Elves, very good value. Even the Bleak Swords doing pretty well for themselves. The Assassin was not too relevant. He would have been more useful if there were more dwarf characters, but they got cleared up by Lokir alone. Very impressive and very fun to see. Lokir Fellheart. And at the end of the day, the dwarves just could not hold up the Dark Elves. This is basically a DPS check build. It's not a whole lot going on. He kind of tried to reduce the damage of their range units with the Rangers. But if the Dark Elf player is good enough and they can actually clear this army out, you're basically screwed. Executioners getting pretty cool damage too. There was even a Medusa in case Dark Elves wanted to go for some kite action. And I believe that's gonna be it. Funnily enough, though, I think a Dwarf Air Force might have been able to counter this. But Dwarven Air Forces can be very risky. It's kind of how dwarves work. You're really just rolling the dice. But let's take a look at this. Adler going for another pretty standard dwarf counter. Not nearly as strong as the Dark Elves, but still quite terrifying. For the dwarf build, a little bit of unorthodoxness again. When you get to really high level play, people start bringing in crazy builds because we're seeing counter picks come in. So counters to the counters show up, and then some weird units arrive. The mind games are real, and indeed it's going to be hammerers. This is probably the least used dwarf unit on the entire roster. Less used than the Thunder Barge. Less used than all of their weird heroes. I would say I see these guys about as much as Felix nowadays, but even Felix had time to shine way back. Double Runesmith? Double Runesmith? I thought this was garbage, but no, he has double Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Double Rune of Negation. That's gonna make these guys cost about 700 gold a pop. That is quite expensive. That's as much as an entire, like, Dwarf Warrior unit plus a Miner. A little less expensive than that, but still quite the pretty penny. It's gonna reduce the size of his army quite a bit, so these guys have to get value. A Belagar Iron Hammer, by the way. Old school. This is some Warhammer 2 tech. He's very tanky, very fighty. Some of the best stats in the game. And it's going to be a bunch of Rangers. Another artillery piece. This time a cannon has arrived. And that's to counter this high elf build of a Lion Chariot. Chariots are a very good counter to dwarves. If they don't have the right tools to shut it down, they basically mop up infantry. So the elf game plan is probably to take out this artillery piece and then let the chariots feast. We have Sea Lord Aislinn over here. He's got Master of the Mists. That's pretty cool. It's basically an insane range buff, and it makes your range units have enough firepower, enough range to attack artillery, if they get close enough. Good Wrath and Ruin, by the way, on the ship's company. Not a terrible situation. That's actually pretty decent. Was that a double cast? I can't tell if these guys are on cooldown or not. Game's UI is not able to support that. Oh, big cannonball shots on the ship's company. Many units going down, but they do get in melee against the Rangers. This is pretty bad for the Rangers. Hammerers versus White Lions. Now, this is kind of what's cool about the Hammerers. They usually, or White Lions, they usually beat all dwarf infantry. But this is the one that they have a very hard time against. Whoa, what is that? Oceanid summon. Trying to turn the tide of battle. Hammerers don't have magic attacks, but this is just a summon. You can just wait them out. And indeed, the Hammerers win, but at what cost? Oceanids are slipping through the lines. And they're going to be bullying some Rangers. Nullstone is activated, which removes magic attacks from all units. The dwarves don't have magic attacks. So Nullstone is basically just putting his own abilities on cooldown. Don't know why he's doing that, but sure. A little bit awkward, actually. I don't know why he's doing that. I guess he's turning off the abilities on Belagar, so he can't use the Oathstone. I don't know if he already used it, though. In general, however, I think this is still not bad for the High Elves. They're getting some good jumps on the back line, and their units are still alive. Master of the Mists with the range boost is active. You can see just how big of a bubble these guys have. Look at that. They can hit all the way over here where these Thunderers are. A little far, though. They're not going to do that much damage. These guys are shielded. But overall, as long as these Lion Chariots survive, I think the dwarves, or I think the High Elves are happy. One of them, though, getting blasted by the cannons, getting shot at by the Thunderers. It's not over yet, and the dwarves are trading pretty well, yeah? I'm getting a call. It's spam. But yeah, it's going not bad for the dwarves. They are clearing up pretty well here. The runesmiths are giving a lot of capture weight to secure this point. And the chariots are going down. I will say the hammers are doing pretty well. But if this mist mage can keep disrupting the back line and this chariot keeps cleaning up here, I think the High Elves will be able to win this fight. It seems like the units are mostly dealing with the hammerers. There's the mighty Oathstone active. But can they really keep holding? Here's the problem. Dwarves can only field 2 or 3 hammers. And the High Elves can keep spamming White Lions. So eventually, even though the initial dwarf force will uptrade, they're just not good enough to cleave through endless hordes of High Elves. You know, they're no executioners. This is why you don't see hammers very often. It's because they can't carry on their own. They still need support. And as soon as that support runs out, life gets pretty nasty. Thunderers are getting bullied now by these Oceanids. This is yet another summon. Chariots are still alive, by the way, getting lots of damage. And the hammerers are going down. Wrath and Ruin hits the Shadow Warriors, but it doesn't do killing damage. It spreads evenly amongst them. So their effectiveness at range is still good. And the dwarves lose the middle point. Despite things looking fairly good, at the end of the day, the win condition for High Elves is gonna be these chariots. And the one cannon is simply not enough to disrupt them. Maybe he needed another cannon. I'm not entirely sure, but the tide of battle has shifted quite dramatically. And without elite infantry being summoned in, the White Lions are gonna feast. charging straight into these dwarf warriors. They're going to take him out. Aislinn ready to beat up all these dwarf characters. He does have anti-infantry. Bonus 28, rather insane. Who would have guessed it? Anti-infantry is very good against dwarves, and also a ludicrous amount of melee defense. In fact, that is his base melee defense. With martial mastery and naval discipline, Aislinn has more melee defense than Belegar. Actually kind of insane. I think a lot of people at this point know Commissar likes to go for the hero squad too. So they're just bringing these anti-infantry characters to clean up. Commissar doesn't always go for these characters, but it's common enough where if you just bring a mega duelist, they can definitely get the job done. Getting a hit on that runesmith now. He looks like he's gonna go down. And I'd be very worried if I was a dwarf player here. Things are not looking very good. Runesmith going down. Cannon doing its bestest. Chariots are getting really low now, but this thing's not Chevron, so at this range, it has a hard time hitting those chariots. Wrath and Ruin still hasn't killed any Shadow Warriors, so it's kind of false value, these guys. 645 didn't pay for himself. 700 barely paid for himself. But a lot of the value is on Shadow Walkers who just stayed alive and got all their shots off, you know? It's like doing damage to single entities. Yes, you got value, but if they're not dead, they're still just as useful as they normally are. And unlike last game, the High Elves captured the point just in time to win on 2 points. So now we're going into the late game. Trading matters less, point capture matters more. And the Dwarves, they need to resecure this if they want any hope of winning. But the value's just a little too far behind. It's not looking good for the proud Dowie. Oceanids coming on in, they're doing their best. Even against Giant Slayers, they're doing pretty well. Just a summon too, so he's happy to trade that value. Rugara's Pride is charging on in. Right into Slayers, actually. This is a little bit sketchy. You don't want to be just throwing your units away here. If Dwarves do manage to capture this point, by the way, for even a few seconds, or even just a little bit, they can win on a single cap, but I think it's a little too far gone now. High Elves are able to get into the safety zone. They're catching up on tickets, and all they got to do now is take the sweet time and value trade. Thankfully for them, the Rugara's Pride did disengage. Had they stayed there, that would have been devastating. And what's really left here for the Dwarves? We have just the cannon, just the Slayers, but this is a capture point game mode at the end of the day. And then, unless we see a miracle, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. The Dwarves simply do not have enough capture weight. Close to this point, it's just this unit of Slayers. The cannons can value trade all day, but High Elves will just keep summoning in units. Belegar now dueling Aislinn. Who's gonna win? It's basically a wet noodle contest. Neither unit can hit each other. A little spin to win there from Aislinn. Belegar doing a much slower spin. Oh, but the steel chair from the Mist Mage right behind Belegar. He's still not gonna hit though. His melee attack's not very high. Although hitting from behind does increase your melee attack. It's still a little lackluster. This is a great thing about Belegar. He just doesn't die. But he doesn't really make plays. So you kind of need to be winning on the other fronts before Belegar starts feeling useful. Good blasting charge volley on the Rangers here though, but now the Dwarves are triple capped. And a lot of the times what players will do, they'll just start converting these tickets into value to just army wipe you. You know, while you're trying to capture points, while you're trying to save yourself, you'll just run around, kill your artillery pieces, get free pickings, and before you know it, you have no units left, and then they just retake all the points. It's a very comfortable win condition. In this case, I think Adler's just going for the kill. He's just pushing units to secure these points because I don't think he feels like he's going to be punished for it. It's just going to be a melee. And because all the hammerers are dead, these company of Caladrian armor-piercing axe infantry, they're just going to crush it. Over in the distance, the artillery piece finally goes down. The cannon served valiantly, but it was not enough. And are we gonna see anything here? Are we gonna see anything to get the dwarves to come back? This guy just used, what, Walk Between Worlds? Giving some physical visits to these reavers. He's in cleanup mode, though. He's not worried about efficiency. He's just chucking out whatever he can to get rid of the rest of the Dowie. Adler now at 1,100 tickets. Point does get secured here for the dwarves. In fact, they're almost going to get a double cap, but I think this unit, yeah, they're gonna barely hold it. You know, funnily enough, if the dwarves did get a double cap there and they held it, they actually could have won on 2 points. But there's still too many elves, right? It was kind of close in the end, though, I will say. Obviously, the elves kind of got a little bit more relaxed. They weren't going for the super cutthroat plays. There were a few charges into Slayers that were a little needless, but I see. They were just saving up for the Lion Chariots. You can see Adler had a lot of money in reserves. And that's going to be it. Dwarven Hammerers. They did pretty good. They did pay for themselves. It makes you wonder if dwarves could field even more Hammerers. Would they be able to win it? Personally, I don't think so. Those Lion Chariots were absolutely devastating. Let's just take a quick look at their value. Oh my goodness, wonderful. Even though they technically didn't fully pay for themselves, this was all damage on Hammerers. And if your value is 100% clearing the win condition of the dwarves, you're feeling pretty good. Runesmiths were okay value targets, but they weren't making plays. They didn't kill the Lion Chariots. And the cannon, lots of value, but a little too slow once again. Very unfortunate. Dwarf main goes down. And that means Mr. Adler will be moving up to face off one of the other top players. We'll see. They're actually, I think they're furthest in the bracket right now. So, we'll see who they face.